Welcome to another quiet journey into the past. This time we'll drift back into the foggy streets of 19th century London, a city of contrasts. Where grand wealth and innovation sat side by side with desperate poverty, the Victorian age is often remembered as a time of progress. It was the age of steam trains and expanding cities, of factories, inventions, and empire. But beneath the surface of this celebrated progress, another world existed. It was a world of coal, smoke, and crowded alleys, of hunger, disease, and endless labor. A world where life for millions was a daily struggle, and survival was far from guaranteed. Tonight, we will linger in that world, gently exploring its forgotten corners. We will move slowly, without hurry. First, we'll step into the cramped and difficult life of a slum dweller in Victorian London, experiencing the rhythm of their days and nights. Then, we'll follow the life of Charles Dickens, whose own hardships shaped the stories that gave voice to these people. After that, we will wander through the mystery of Jack the Ripper, a shadow that fell over Whitechapel and has never fully lifted. And finally, we'll step into another London altogether, the polished world of Victorian aristocrats, whose lives of comfort contrasted so starkly with the struggles of the poor. Take a slow breath, and as you settle in, let your imagination drift. Back to a time when the streets of London were thick with soot, the clatter of carts, and the muffled voices of millions just trying to survive. Imagine yourself in London in the year 1850. The city is enormous by the standards of its time, already swelling with more than 2 million souls. You are not among the wealthy, nor even the middling classes. You belong to the poor. You live in the districts that newspapers sometimes call rookeries or nests, because they seem to swarm with people. Your home is a single, dimly lit room in a narrow building. The walls are damp to the touch, and the air is always heavy, thick with the scent of coal smoke, stale food, and the faint tang of sewage that seeps up through the drains. Windows, if there are any, are small and grimy, letting in little light. Privacy is rare. Entire families, sometimes 5, 6, or more crowd together in one space, sleeping side by side on straw pallets or old rags. The streets outside are narrow and winding, often unpaved or broken, slick with mud after rain. Open gutters carry away waste, though not always far enough. The sound of cartwheels over cobbles mixes with the cries of vendors selling scraps of food, and the constant coughing of children and adults alike. Disease is a constant companion. Cholera, typhus, smallpox, any of these could sweep through the slums, taking lives quickly and leaving families broken. The rhythm of your life is shaped by work, if you are lucky enough to find it. Children as young as 5 are sent out to earn coins, sorting through refuse for bones, or bits of rags to sell, or working long hours in factories where the air is thick with dust. If you are a woman, you might take in laundry, scrubbing clothes until your hands are raw, or sewing until your eyes ache by candlelight. If you are a man, you might labor on the docks, or haul loads of coal, or work as a costermonger, selling cheap goods from a cart. The hours are long, the pay meager, and the work never certain. Food is plain and monotonous, often just bread, a little tea, and if fortune allows, some potatoes or scraps of meat. Hunger is never far away. So alcohol, especially gin, offers escape for many, but it also deepens poverty and despair. At night, the slums do not fall silent. Voices carry through thin walls, arguments, laughter, and crying. Street lamps, where they exist, cast a weak glow, leaving alleys in deep shadow. In those shadows, crime thrives, pickpocketing, theft, and sometimes violence. Yet the most striking thing is not the crime, but the endurance. People go on. They survive each day not because life is easy, but because there is no other choice. Still, there is community here. Neighbors know one another. Families share what little they can. Children play in the alleys when they are not at work, finding scraps of joy where they can. The rhythm of survival, though harsh, is also steady, and in that rhythm there is a strange kind of order. Take a moment to picture this world. Narrow streets, the crowded rooms, the coal smoke hanging in the air. The persistence of life in conditions that tested the limits of endurance. It is easy to romanticize the past, but here, in the slums of Victorian London, romance is rare. Instead, there is resilience, and the quiet struggle of ordinary people against the weight of circumstance. And as we leave these cramped alleys behind, let us drift towards another figure of this age, a man who grew up in hardship himself, and who used the power of words to shine a light on lives like these. His name was Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens is remembered today as one of the greatest writers in the English language. His novels Oliver Twist, Great Expectations, A Tale of Two Cities are still read, studied, and loved around the world. But behind his enduring fame lies a life shaped by hardship, disappointment, and a deep understanding of poverty. To understand Dickens is to understand why he was able to write so vividly about the struggles of the poor in Victorian London. Imagine him as a boy in the early 1820s. He was not born into wealth, though his family belonged to the fragile middle class. His father, John Dickens, worked as a clerk in the Navy Pay Office. He earned a respectable income, but he spent freely, often beyond his means. Money troubles were a constant shadow in the household. By the time Charles was just 12 years old, disaster struck. His father's debts overwhelmed him, and the family was sent to a debtor's prison, the Marshalsea. For young Charles, it was a devastating moment. While his family lived within the prison walls, he was forced to board outside and earn money to support them. His job was monotonous, exhausting, and humiliating. He worked in a warehouse that bottled blacking, a thick polish for boots. Day after day, he pasted labels on jars, standing for long hours in the dusty, foul-smelling rooms. For a child of 12, it was crushing. He later described the shame he felt, the sense that his dreams of education and a better life were slipping away. That experience never left him. It carved into his mind a sympathy for the poor, for children forced into labor, for families struggling against debt and circumstance. Many of the themes that run through his novels, the abandoned child, the cruel master, the grinding poverty of the streets, came directly from those early years. As Dickens grew older, he found a way out. He returned to school when his father was released, and later he trained as a shorthand reporter, covering debates in Parliament. His sharp memory, quick pen, and keen eye for human detail served him well. By his 20s, he had begun publishing stories, first under the pseudonym Boz. His first major success came with the Pickwick Papers in 1836. It was meant to be a simple serial, light and comic, but Dickens's talent for character and humor made it a sensation. Readers eagerly awaited each installment. Soon he was famous. But Dickens was not content to simply entertain. His novels increasingly focused on social issues, child labor, debtors, prisons, corrupt officials, and the grinding inequality of Victorian society. In Oliver Twist, the orphan boy faces hunger, cruelty, and the dark world of crime, mirroring the very conditions Dickens had witnessed. In Hard Times, he critiqued the harsh realities of industrial life. In Bleak House, he took aim at the endless tangles of the legal system. Fame did not free him from personal struggles. Dickens had a large family of his own, and though he earned substantial sums, he also lived extravagantly, echoing his father's habits. His marriage became unhappy, and in later years he separated from his wife. Yet through it all, his writing poured out, each new novel cementing his place as the voice of Victorian England. He also used his fame for advocacy, gave speeches, supported charities, and edited journals that addressed social reform. His words carried weight, and they helped bring attention to the plight of those who were often ignored by polite society. In his later years, Dickens embarked on exhausting reading tours, traveling across Britain and even to America. His energy seemed boundless, but his health began to decline. 1870, he died suddenly at the age of 58. His funeral was held quietly, but his legacy has endured far beyond his lifetime. As you picture Dickens, you might imagine him not just as a great writer, but as a child in a dark warehouse, pasting labels and longing for something more. That boy never truly left him. The hardships of his youth gave depth to his compassion, sharpened his eye for injustice, and fueled the novels that continue to shape how we imagine Victorian life. And just as Dickens revealed the hidden struggles of his time, there were other mysteries in Victorian London that fascinated, disturbed, and frightened the public. Perhaps the most enduring is the mystery of Jack the Ripper, a figure whose shadow still lingers over history. Let us drift now into that shadow, not with fear, but with quiet curiosity, to explore what happened in the gaslit alleys of Whitechapel. By the late 1880s, London had grown even larger and more crowded. The East End, particularly the district of Whitechapel, was home to thousands of the city's poorest residents. Narrow streets twisted between rows of shabby lodging houses, cheap gin shops, and dimly lit alleyways. Life was hard, and for many, survival meant clinging to whatever work or shelter they could find. It was here in 1888 that a series of murders took place, crimes that would capture the imagination of the public, disturb the city, and echo through history under a single name: Jack the Ripper. The identity of the killer has never been confirmed. What is remembered is the fear and fascination the murders inspired. Newspapers, already hungry for sensational stories, covered every detail. Crowds gathered at crime scenes, whispering rumors and speculating on suspects. Letters, some genuine and others hoaxes, flooded police offices, signed with the chilling name Jack the Ripper. But rather than focusing on the violence itself, it is useful to pause and consider what these events reveal about Victorian society. Whitechapel was a place of poverty, overcrowding, and neglect. Many of its residents lived in lodging houses that rented beds by the night. Work was uncertain, wages were meager, and women often had little choice but to take to the streets to survive. The murders exposed this hidden world to the wider public. Suddenly, people who lived far from Whitechapel, those in the wealthier districts of London, were reading about its alleys and its hardships in the morning papers. The crime shocked them, but they also forced them to acknowledge conditions that had long been ignored. The police, for all their efforts, struggled to make progress. Detectives interviewed witnesses, followed trails of evidence, and chased countless leads, but the case remained unsolved. Suspects ranged from butchers and sailors to doctors and even aristocrats, though no proof was ever found. What lingers more than the crimes themselves is the sense of mystery. The idea that someone could walk the streets of London, commit terrible acts, and then vanish into the fog left the city uneasy. It raised questions about safety, about the limits of law enforcement, and about the unseen lives of those living in poverty. Even today, more than a century later, books, documentaries, and theories continue to circle around the question: who was Jack the Ripper? Some claim new evidence, others trace old suspects, but the truth remains elusive. The mystery itself seems to endure longer than any solution could. As you imagine the gaslit streets of Whitechapel, picture them not only as the backdrop for crime, but also as the daily reality for thousands of ordinary people. Cobblestones slick with rain, lanterns flickering in the mist, market stalls closing for the night, and footsteps echoing in narrow passageways. It was a place of hardship, but also of resilience, where life continued despite the shadows that haunted it. And so we leave the mystery unresolved, as it has always been, letting it fade back into the fog. From here, let us travel to another side of Victorian life entirely, a world not of struggle and fear, but of comfort and privilege. For while some endured the slums of Whitechapel, others lived in grand houses with servants, fine clothes, and carefully ordered routines. Let us now step into a country estate to explore a day in the life of a Victorian aristocrat. While the slums of London bustled with hardship and uncertainty, another world existed at the very same time. This was the world of the aristocracy, families of wealth, status, and influence, whose lives unfolded not in cramped alleys, but in sprawling country houses or elegant townhouses. Their days were structured, polished, and bound by tradition. Imagine yourself waking in one of these grand estates, far from the soot and din of London. The house is large, perhaps with dozens of rooms, long corridors, and high ceilings decorated with ornate plasterwork. Your bedroom is warmed by a fire already kindled by servants before you rise. Heavy curtains soften the morning light, and the faint sound of footsteps in distant halls signals that the household is already stirring. Your day begins not with labor, but with leisure. A maid brings in hot water for washing, perhaps even a tray with tea. Breakfast is laid out in a dining room, Meg's cold meats, fresh bread, and fruit. Conversation is quiet, polite, sometimes formal. The food is abundant, a contrast to the meager meals of the poor, and much of it comes from the estate's own lands or from suppliers eager to serve the wealthy. The morning might be spent on correspondence. Letters arrive daily, carried by the reliable Victorian post, and they are answered with care. For men, affairs of business, estate management, or politics might occupy the first hours. For women, overseeing household arrangements, managing servants, or working on charitable projects might fill the time. Servants are everywhere, though often discreet. Butlers, housemaids, cooks, footmen, gardeners, and coachmen all keep the estate running smoothly. Their labor is constant, though it is designed to be invisible, so that the family may move through their days in ease. The afternoon might bring leisure, a ride across the grounds, stroll in carefully landscaped gardens, or a visit with neighboring families. Tea is served in the mid-afternoon, accompanied by small cakes or sandwiches, a ritual that has since become emblematic of Victorian refinement. Evenings are occasions for formality. Dinner is not just a meal, but a performance of wealth and status. The table is set with fine china and silver, the courses arrive in order, and conversation is shaped by etiquette. Guests might be present, seated according to rank and importance. Topics of discussion range from politics to literature, travel to the latest fashions. After dinner, entertainment might include music, a reading, or simple conversation in the drawing room. Sometimes, the day concludes with a ball or a gathering where dances are carefully arranged and appearances are as important as enjoyment. Clothes, manners, and connections all play their part in reinforcing social order. It is easy to picture this world as one of effortless grace, but it was not without pressures of its own. Wealth carried responsibilities. Estates required management, and appearances had to be constantly maintained. Marriages were often strategic, securing alliances between families. Expectations of behavior were strict, and deviation could lead to scandal. Yet compared to the uncertainty of life in the slums, the life of the aristocracy was one of extraordinary privilege and comfort. Picture for a moment the contrast. In one corner of Victorian society, children scavenged for scraps in narrow alleys. In another, children played in manicured gardens, watched over by governesses. In one world, families crowded into single rooms. In another, guests wandered through ballrooms and dined by candlelight. The gulf was vast, yet both worlds were part of the same city, the same age. And so as we leave the halls of the aristocrats with their chandeliers and polished floors, we return to the larger picture of Victorian life, an age of progress. Yes, but also of inequality of light and shadow, wealth and want. The Victorian age was many things at once. It was an era of invention and empire, of novels and newspapers, of reform and tradition. But more than anything, it was a time of contrasts. For the poor, life in the slums was a daily struggle against hunger, disease, and uncertainty. For Dickens, hardship shaped creativity, turning personal pain into stories that revealed hidden truths. For Whitechapel, mystery and fear crept into its fog-filled alleys, leaving questions that remain unanswered. And for the aristocracy, privilege meant comfort, but also duty, expectation, and the endless performance of status. As you lie here now, reflecting on these different lives, you may notice the distance between then and now. The coal smoke is cleared, crowded rookeries are gone. The fear of disease and starvation no longer presses on every breath. What remains are stories, reminders of endurance and resilience of human lives lived in conditions very different from our own. Let the past fade gently from your mind. The streets grow quiet, the lamps dim, and the city falls to rest. You too may rest now. Leave the struggles and the grandeur of Victorian London behind, and drift softly into sleep.